You got to say the deal sounds very much like surrender on our part. And ultimately, President Trump, that's not to take agency away from the president who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible.
But the reality is nobody thinks this was a big victory for the United States. Nobody can see anything but actually a bit of a humiliation.
He doesn't care, Piers, because he doesn't care about the Republican Party. He cares about himself. If Trump had to get reelected, he probably would have handled this a little differently. But he doesn't care that the Republicans are going to lose the midterms. I think he thought that was a foregone conclusion. And I don't think he cares that J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio wins the presidency next time around. I think there's a piece of Trump that would like to say, I'm the only one who could do it. The Republican Party's nothing without me. And the rest of us are going to be around to pick up the pieces.
All right. First tonight, I'm joined by Megyn Kelly, host of the Megyn Kelly Show. Megyn, what's been the point of it all?
You got to say the deal sounds very much like surrender on our part, which I'm in favor of. I mean, great. This needed to end. That they were not likely to collapse easily and that they probably would maintain control of the strait and could cause a global economic panic. And he didn't listen. What he did with the Dan Kane warnings was rush to Truth Social, Trump did, saying, all Dan Kane knows how to do is win. And if I tell him to invade, he's going to win. Well, that's not really what happened. And, you know, we've already learned this. Trump watched us learn it. And so what led Trump, at 79 years old, to sit in there in that Situation Room when Bibi Netanyahu was seated as an equal?
Yeah.
Trump didn't even sit at the head of the table. Trump sat at the side of the table and Bibi was across from him as an equal in the American Situation Room. What led him to sit there and buy what that guy was selling hook, line, and sinker when every other president was able to see through that liar? Because he was told the next day by our own top advisors, from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to the Secretary of State to the vice president, that these are lies and that these objectives are not going to be attainable. Don't believe him. We might be able to wipe out the Ayatollah, not regime change, Ayatollah. And we might be able to decimate some portion of their missiles and their military. Okay, that's true. But the goals as stated by Trump when we actually did pull the trigger were all over the board. And to this moment, he's pushing the BS claim that we affected regime change. No, we didn't. It's the same regime, just different players. There isn't somebody more moderate in there at all. We have no reason to believe that. In fact, it looks like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is in control now, which is far more radical. And the fatwa that had allegedly been issued by the Ayatollah on developing nukes is gone. Iran is more powerful economically. It controls the strait and now is demanding the lifting of all sanctions against it. And what Trump did with that 10-point plan was go from Monday saying, no, not good, to Tuesday saying, very workable, we can do it, as a means of saving face to bail off of his insane threats about annihilating an entire civilization. So I don't know how we got here, Piers. I'd like to know just as much as anybody else, but all I can think in my head, based on what I've read in the paper, is we got here thanks to Bibi Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, and Mark Levin. And ultimately, President Trump. That's not to take agency away from the president who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible to see through the lies. One way or another, he allowed himself to be pushed into this insane conflict. They're going to spend it on themselves. They've got to rebuild massive portions of their own countries thanks to the bombing campaign unleashed against them, because they were within reach, by Iran, who couldn't reach us. So we've upset our allies. We've pleased Israel, although now they're upset that there's a ceasefire. We've upset the American base. The Trump coalition that got him elected is completely fractured and in smithereens. And he doesn't care, Piers, because he doesn't care about the Republican Party. He cares about himself. If Trump had to get reelected, he probably would have handled this a little differently. But he doesn't care that the Republicans are going to lose the midterms. I think he thought that was a foregone conclusion. And I don't think he cares that J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio wins the presidency next time around. I think there's a piece of Trump that would like to say, I'm the only one who could do it. The Republican Party's nothing without me. And the rest of us are going to be around to pick up the pieces.
And I think Trump will regret this. Well, you're right. He may not care. He may want to just say, moving on, it's a big victory, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is nobody thinks this was a big victory for the United States. Nobody can see anything but actually a bit of a humiliation, not militarily, because America can beat anyone when it comes to a military punch-up. But what Iran has now discovered is that as long as it can control the Strait of Hormuz, it can control the global economy, and therefore it can, if it has enough patience, play out the long game with the President of the United States, who will have to cave, because ultimately it's going to cause him so much economic and political damage, he has no choice. That's what's happened here. Trump hasn't brought this to an end out of some great desire for peace. He's brought it to an end because he could see that the economic and political damage was getting worse by the day.
Because the Iranians wouldn't fold. They realized what the pressure point was and that it was working. And they watched Trump's poll numbers spiral downward in every piece of the coalition that elected him. And they realized that their ability to just withstand the beating was working, was getting them to where they needed to get. Because, look, there was never majority support behind this war. There wasn't some groundswell of support behind this war, right? There was a Republican-based support for the war, but the Democrats didn't support it. The independents didn't support it. And very soon into the war, the Republicans stopped supporting it too. MAGA supported it. As MAGA dwindled, by the way, it was already only about 15% of the population. It's getting smaller by the day. President Trump 3 weeks ago declared that to be MAGA, you have to support Mark Levin, upon which multiple formerly diehard MAGA people who are dedicated to it said, I'm out.
Now, the folly of this war from day one, I have, Tucker has, Candace Owens has, Joe Rogan has, Theo Von has. I mean, there is a massive cross-section of people in our world, which is what I call the unfiltered world, where you're not controlled perhaps by other forces that own networks and so on, that sort of send out a directive about what you should and shouldn't be saying. So in the free spirit world, where you can say what you really think, pretty much everyone has been agreed. This looked like madness.
And it wasn't just Steve Chung, who is a master messenger and saw the storm coming. It was J.D. Vance, who, according to the New York Times, was in there specifically saying it's going to fracture the coalition. And boy, is that an understatement. Trump is now underwater, and he wasn't before, with men. Don't forget the gender divide that happened in 2024. The women went overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris, and men went for Trump. Now he's underwater with men, including with young men and young people. The young person coalition that Charlie Kirk delivered to the president is gone. They've abandoned Donald Trump. The working class, Piers. The latest poll that just came out showed he's 2 points underwater with the working class. That's been Trump's base from the beginning. They were the unshakable foundation that got him elected over and over. And they're gone. They're very angry. They care about what's happening in Iowa, not Iran. They don't want days and days and more weeks of debates over the Strait of Hormuz. No one cares. They care about their own lives. They care about the fact that they can't pay for health care. They can't buy a home. Young people cannot get a home, even though 2 people are working nonstop, round the clock, with no vacations in this country. President Trump promised he would do something about that. Now we see the leaked soundbite saying, can't really worry about anything at the federal government level other than military. Everything else has to be done at the state. Then they pulled that down off the internet because they didn't mean to share it. He said it at an Easter breakfast that was supposed to be private. Well, it's going to be the campaign ad for every Democrat in these midterms. So he's lost working class, he's lost men, he's lost young people, he lost Hispanics by some 50 points. Every single gain with Hispanics is now gone. It's eradicated. Blacks, he had made some inroads with black voters. Done. You name it, they're all gone. The question is now not who has he lost, the question is who remains. And sure, it's the diehard MAGA. Trump can do no wrong. He's some savant. Whatever he says is right. That's great. He'll always have those people. You can't win national elections with some fraction of 15% of the electorate. The vast majority of Republicans would call themselves America First, but not necessarily MAGA, certainly not the way Trump is now defining that term. And he misunderstood his own base twice critically in the past year. And both times are really undermining him right now. One was Epstein, thinking he could just say, Epstein, who still cares about that? No one's talking about Epstein. He misread the base, which very much cared about Epstein. And Trump could not get rid of that with a shrug of a shoulder. And ultimately it resulted in legislation he had to pretend he favored that was crammed down his throat and he had to sign though it had enough loopholes in it to drive a Mack truck through, forward on Epstein that he didn't want to make and was forced to. And this is the second one. And this is a much, much bigger and more serious betrayal of what he ran on and of what was important to his base, which does include the America Firsters and not just MAGA. Or as Marjorie Taylor Greene has been saying, at this point, she's not America First, she's America only. And I think a lot of us are getting to that point. We are sick of being the policemen of the world, of being dragged into conflict after conflict by Bibi Netanyahu, by Israel, who's supposed to be our special ally. But what they're special at is getting us to fight their wars and get involved in their conflicts that they can't fight by themselves. That's what Dan Kane said to President Trump the day after Netanyahu came for the 7th time and was sitting in that situation room like an equal. He said that they're great on intelligence. That's supposed to be the area in which they're so special to us. They share their intelligence. They're great on it. But that intelligence doesn't always seem to pan out. Like, the regime will fall easily. The Iranian people will revolt in the streets and take over. With how? They don't have guns. Bombs would be raining down. Wasn't this thought through? There isn't regime change. The Iranian people are arguably worse off than they were before. And it's all based on Bibi Netanyahu's special intelligence, which cost at least 15 American lives, the fracturing of the Trump coalition, probably at least the next 2 elections for Republicans, not to mention the amount of lives and blood and treasure that was spilled in the Middle East. So great job. Now, as you can imagine, that post did not go over well with the Iranians or with many Americans. I mean, I don't know about you, but I am sick of this shit. I'm sick of it. Can't he just behave like a normal human? I mean, honestly, like the president, 3D, yes, shut up. Fucking shut up about that shit. You don't threaten to wipe out an entire civilization. We're talking about civilians just casually in a social media post. You know, like I am the first to try to understand Trump and his strategy and to not freak out over his weird social media posts and language that is loose and incendiary. Truly, I've lived with it for 10 plus years. I learned it the hard way when I was on the receiving end of it for 9 months. And truly, I think that was a gift to me in many ways because it helped me really come to understand what he does with his social media. But this is completely irresponsible and disgusting. This is wrong. It's wrong. He should not be doing it. I don't care that it's his negotiation tactic is to kill an entire country full of civilians, men, women, and children. An American president so that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened. It's just wrong. It's not hard to say it. It's not hard to recognize it. I wish he would stop doing this. Like, he can't negotiate without doing this. What does that say about him? What does that say about the position that our country is in right now in these negotiations? He's got to say this. He can't be a dignified, strong leader without threatening a bunch of war crimes. Like what is he, Genghis Khan? Like what is he trying to do? And why can't he do it with strength, threats? Sure, go for it. That don't diminish and demean the United States of America in this way. All right.